Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into some ideas that really push back against the usual advice for living a better life.
Definitely counterintuitive stuff.
We've got these key excerpts from The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and our mission really is to unpack what's inside.
Mm-hmm.
What does this whole not giving a fuck thing actually mean? How does it challenge, this standard playbook for happiness and success?
And what can we actually take away from it? What really matters, according to this perspective?
So let's start right there with the title. It's provocative. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. What does it not mean? Because I think that's the first hurdle.
Right. And the source material is pretty clear on this. It's not about being indifferent. It's not apathy.
Yeah, you're not aiming for emotionless. The source mentions, someone who feels nothing, finds no meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the psychopath. Not exactly the goal here.
Definitely not. So if it's not indifference, what is it?
Well, it seems to be about choosing. Choosing what gets your energy, your attention.
Exactly. It's about being comfortable with things being difficult sometimes. Comfortable with adversity.
And choosing what matters based on your own values, right? Not just reacting to everything.
Mm-hmm. And focusing your thoughts, prioritizing effectively. That's the idea.
And it's called a subtle art for a reason, I guess. It's not easy.
No, the sources frame it as a lifelong practice, something that takes discipline, and you're gonna fail at it regularly.
But it's presented as a worthwhile struggle.
Yeah, maybe one of the most worthwhile.
Think about how much energy we spend on trivial things.
Mm-hmm.
The source gives examples like a rude gas station attendant or your favorite show getting canceled.
Or coworkers not asking about your weekend, stuff like that. We give, well, too many fucks about things that don't really deserve them.
So a lot of our struggles might come from just over-investing in the small stuff.
That's the argument. We have finite energy, finite fucks to give, and we often misspend them.
And the goal isn't to somehow reach a state of no problems.
Yeah.
Like, get away from the shit, as the source puts it.
No, not at all. Problems are always there. They just,
Yeah.
they change, or maybe they get upgraded.
So the point is,
The point is to find the shit you enjoy dealing with, to choose your problems in a way.
okay, this is interesting. To not care about adversity, you first have to care about something more important.
Yes, that's key. The example given is an elderly lady yelling about a tiny coupon discount.
Why get so worked up?
Well, the suggestion is perhaps there's nothing bigger, nothing more meaningful demanding her attention and her fucks. So they go to the coupon.
Wow. That implies that figuring out what's genuinely important to you is maybe the most productive thing you can do.
It really does, because if you don't find that meaningful core, your energy, your fucks, they'll just drift towards, well, meaningless stuff, shallow pursuits.
So consciously choosing where to invest that energy, family, friends, work you care about, that simplifies things.
It simplifies, and the source suggests, paradoxically, that this simplification can lead to more stable happiness, reserving those ever-dwindling fucks for what's truly fuck-worthy.
It reminds me of the Charles Bukowski example in the source. He wasn't trying to be a conventional winner.
Not at all. He was an alcoholic, kind of a mess by societal standards. But he didn't give a fuck about that kind of success.
He accepted himself, flaws and all.
He accepted being a loser, as he put it, and wrote honestly about it. His success came from that brutal honesty, that comfort with his own perceived failure. He wasn't chasing external validation.
And that just clashes so hard with, well, with everything around us today.
Completely. The culture screams, be happier, healthier, the best, be richer, perfect, amazing.
Yeah, the source talks about these unrealistic positive expectations, like you're supposed to magically crap out gold nuggets or something.
Right, and the constant push to buy more, own more, make more, fuck more, be more, give a fuck about the new TV, the better vacation, the perfect selfie.
And then you see, the teenager getting a Ferrari on TV or the tech billionaire
Yeah.
while you're at home, as the source amusingly says, flossing your cat.
And it just makes your own life feel lacking, worse by comparison.
Which leads directly into this concept called the feedback loop from hell.
Ah, yes. This feels very relevant today. It's when you feel bad.
And then you feel bad about feeling bad.
Exactly. Or guilty about feeling guilty. Angry about getting angry. Anxious about feeling anxious.
That internal monologue kicks in. What's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm. And the way to short-circuit it, according to this perspective, is simply not giving a fuck that you feel bad.
Just accepting it. Like, okay, I feel like crap right now. So what?
Pretty much. I feel like shit, but who gives a fuck?
It stops that second layer, that spiral of self-recrimination, accepting that negative feelings are just part of life. They happen.
It makes you think about first world problems.
Yeah.
Of so much stuff, so much opportunity.
Right. Materially, we're often doing incredibly well compared to history.
Yet stress, anxiety, depression seem to be soaring.
The source argues it's become an existential crisis. We have so much we've lost track of what's actually worth caring about, what to give a fuck about anymore. So, if chasing constant positivity is a trap, what's the alternative? The source suggests leaning into the negative sometimes.
Yeah, this really flips the script.
Yeah.
The idea is that pursuing the negative, or maybe enduring it, is what actually generates the positive.
How so?
Well, think about it. The pain in the gym, that builds health. Failures in business, they teach you what works, leading to success later.
All right.
But being open about insecurities, which feels vulnerable and painful, that can build real confidence. Honest, difficult conversations, they build trust in relationships.
Suffering through fears builds courage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the
Yeah,
pattern.
The core idea is put starkly. Everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience.
And trying to dodge the negative just makes it worse.
It backfires. Avoiding suffering is suffering. Denying failure is failure. Hiding shame is shame. Pain is described as an inextricable thread in life. You can't just snip it out.
It's built into us, biologically. Pain signals danger, teaches us.
Like touching a hot stove. Yeah. Nature's agent for change. And psychological pain, the source argues, works much the same way. It signals something's out of balance.
So rejection or failure, while they sting, they're actually teaching us something valuable.
Potentially, yes. How to avoid making the same mistakes, how to navigate social situations better.
So if we're always trying to shield ourselves from discomfort, we might be missing out on those lessons, losing the benefits of healthy pain.
And maybe disconnecting from reality a bit, too. And remember that other point, problems never stop.
Right. They just get exchanged or upgraded.
So the real secret sauce, as the source calls it, isn't getting rid of problems, it's getting good at solving them. Happiness comes from the solving.
Which means if you avoid problems or feel like you can't solve them, that leads to misery.
Exactly. And emotions play a role here, but maybe not the one we think. They're signals, biological signals.
Like calls to action for negative emotions, rewards for positive ones.
Sort of. But crucially, they're just signposts, suggestions. They are not commandments.
We shouldn't just blindly obey our feelings.
Probably not. The source is pretty blunt here, comparing basing life decisions purely on emotion to letting a toddler or a dog make the choices because they'll just shit on the carpet.
Huh. Okay. Vivid.
Emotions are fleeting, right? Biology always wants something more. So fixating on being happy means you inevitably end up focusing on what you lack.
And there's that difficult pill to swallow. What creates our good experiences will also define our bad ones. Gain implies potential loss.
You can't have one without the possibility of the other. No permanent relief from suffering, no endless fulfillment. It's just not how it works.
Which leads to a much better question than just, what do you want out of life?
Because everyone wants the good stuff, right? Happy family, cool job, money, love.
Yeah, the easy answer. The source pushes for a deeper, more revealing question.
Which is, what pain do you want in your life? What are you willing to struggle for?
That feels like a much tougher question to answer, honestly.
It is, and the source argues it's a much bigger determinant of how your life actually turns out. Want that corner office, okay? Are you willing to struggle through the 60-hour weeks, the commute, the bureaucracy?
Want a great marriage? Are you willing to struggle through the arguments, the compromises, the messy parts?
Precisely. Happiness requires struggle. It grows from problems. Fulfillment, meaning they aren't handed to you. They're earned by choosing and managing your struggles.
And that powerful line, who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for.
It's not just about willpower, like no pain, no gain. It's presented as more fundamental, a basic component of life.
The author's story about wanting to be a rock star really drives this home.
Yeah, he loved the idea of it, the image, being on stage.
The result, the summit.
But he didn't love the process, the grind, the practicing, hauling amps, booking gigs, dealing with failures.
He didn't love the struggle, the climb itself.
And that's why he failed at it, by his own admission. The people who do succeed in tough fields, the athletes, the artists, the entrepreneurs, they're the ones who, in some way, enjoy or are deeply committed to the specific struggles involved.
They like the climb, or at least accept it as necessary.
Right. So problems lead to happiness, which leads to slightly better problems. It's an upward spiral. The joy is in that climb.
Okay, so if who we are is defined by our struggles, that brings us to how we see ourselves. And the source throws another curveball. You are not special.
Ooh. Yeah, that one lands hard sometimes. The story used is about this guy, Jimmy.
Always talking big. Grand plans, total positivity.
The go-getter facade.
Yeah.
But underneath, all talk. Lived off others, didn't do much, blamed everyone else.
But he felt great about himself. High self-confidence.
Totally. Trapped in this entitled, narcissistic bubble, anyone who doubted him was just a hater. Everything was either proof of his greatness or a threat to it. He was impervious.
Spending all his energy talking about being great instead of
Yeah.
doing anything.
Exactly. And the author admits to his own past entitlement, connecting it to some difficult childhood stuff and a need for acceptance.
Leading to overcompensation, chasing shallow relationships.
Yeah, becoming an immature, selfish player, as he puts it.
It feels weird, though. We're more connected than ever, yet entitlement seems higher.
The source suggests technology might play a role. It lets insecurities run rampant, more freedom to express ourselves, but maybe less tolerance for disagreement. We see opposing views constantly, and it just makes us angrier that they exist.
And maybe our easier lives make us feel entitled for them to be even easier.
Perhaps. This connects to what the source calls the tyranny of exceptionalism.
Right.
Meaning, the simple truth is, most of us are average at most things. Being truly exceptional usually requires insane dedication to one specific thing.
But we're bombarded with exceptionalism all day long.
Right. The internet, TV,
Yeah.
it's information overload. We have infinite access, but finite attention. So only the extreme stuff, the 99.9999th percentile, breaks through the noise.
The best of the best, the worst of the worst, the biggest wins, the craziest stories.
Exactly. We're flooded with the extraordinary. And the source argues this screws up our expectations for ourselves.
It makes us feel inadequate, like we need to be more extreme, more radical, just to matter.
Yeah, it contributes to entitlement and potentially makes us feel worse about our own perfectly normal, average lives. These media narratives pile on to existing insecurities.
So, if we're not necessarily special and we need to manage our expectations, how do we figure out what is worth caring about? This seems to bring us back to values and metrics.
Yes, exactly. Values are the foundation. What do you actually care about? And metrics are how you measure success or failure in relation to those values.
And if your values are unhelpful or your metrics are poorly chosen, everything feels off.
Pretty much. How you react to anything depends on how valuable you judge it to be based on your current framework.
And we're often bad at knowing our real values or why we hold them.
Often, yeah. Like feeling lonely, but just blaming others, instead of looking at our own values around connection or how we act.
The author's example about his brother is helpful here.
Right. The value was have a good relationship, but the metric was frequency of contact, like texts or calls.
Which made him feel like a failure, even if the underlying respect was there.
Exactly. It was a poor metric for the actual value. It shows that if you want to change how you see your problems, you might need to change what you value, or at least how you measure it.
Like Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. Kicked out of Metallica.
Achieved massive success with Megadeth. Value. Success. Metric. Be better than Metallica.
So even with platinum albums and fame, because Metallica was bigger, he still felt like a failure based on that metric.
Yeah, crappy value based on some arbitrary comparison, as the source puts it.
Contrast that with Pete Best, the original Beatles drummer.
Kicked out right before they hit it big. Devastated initially.
But later in life, he said he was happier than he would have been with the Beatles.
Why? Because his values changed. His metrics changed. Fame would be nice, sure, but he came to value his family, his stable marriage, his simpler life more. That became his measure of a good life.
So shitty values tend to be external, outside our control, like wealth, popularity, always feeling good.
Yes. And they cause anxiety because you can't control them, and they can leave you empty even if you achieve them. What's next?
Whereas better values are more internal,
Yeah.
process-oriented.
Like honesty, creativity, standing up for yourself, humility, things you practice continuously. They're never done.
And the growth comes from that ongoing process.
That's where the happiness is generated, according to this view, not from hitting some external target.
Like Picasso and his honest expression value. The napkin drawing was valuable because of the decades of process.
Right. It was simple, humble, but endless. Always room to grow, always a problem to engage with.
Okay, this focus on values and metrics seems to lead to a really core idea about personal growth.
A really fundamental one. The realization that you, individually, are responsible for everything in your life.
Regardless of external circumstances. Regardless of who's to blame.
Regardless, it's about taking ownership of your response.
The William James story illustrates this powerfully. Father of American psychology. but deeply depressed and feeling like a failure early on.
Mm-hmm. And his experiment, for 1 year, assume 100% responsibility for everything. Do everything possible to change things, even if it seems futile.
And if nothing changed after a year, then he could accept powerlessness.
But everything changed. He called it his rebirth, became hugely successful and influential. He credited that year of chosen responsibility.
This distinction between responsibility and fault is crucial then.
Absolutely, they're not the same. Someone can be at fault for causing a situation.
Like hitting your car, they're at fault.
But you are still responsible for how you react, how you interpret it, how you choose to feel about it, what values you apply moving forward.
So many people might be to blame for your unhappiness, but only you are responsible for it.
That's the core assertion. You always have the choice of response, interpretation, and meaning-making.
The author's breakup example, girlfriend cheated, she was to blame.
But he was responsible for his own misery afterwards.
Yes, blaming her felt justified, but kept him stuck. Taking responsibility meant shifting his focus and values towards his own healing and self-care.
And later, recognizing his own part in the unhealthy dynamic, taking responsibility for not repeating those patterns.
Right. That painful event became a catalyst for huge personal growth, more valuable than many successes.
We like taking responsibility for the good stuff.
Of course. But taking responsibility for the problems is where the real learning happens. Blaming just hurts yourself in the end.
And this applies even to things genuinely outside our control, like genetics or past trauma.
Yes, it's not your fault you were dealt a difficult hand. Absolutely not. But it remains your responsibility how you choose to live with it. Seek help, work on it, or don't. The choice of response is still yours. And this avoidance of responsibility ties into something the source calls victimhood chic.
Which is described as being kind of fashionable. Feeling unfairly victimized seems widespread. Yeah, across the board, left, right, rich, poor. The sense of being aggrieved, often fueled by moral outrage over relatively small things.
Getting easily offended becomes a way to feel important, deserving of attention.
Perhaps. And the media environment, the outrage porn, rewards it. Find something mildly offensive, broadcast the outrage. It gets clicks, but distracts from bigger problems.
And it potentially harms actual victims. The boy who cried wolf effect.
That's the danger mention. Plus, there's an addictive quality to outrage. It feels good, that self-righteousness, but it devours us from the inside, as one quote puts it.
And fundamentally, it's another way to avoid taking responsibility for your own reactions and interpretations.
Exactly. It puts the locus of control outside yourself.
Okay, so taking responsibility is key. But changing your values, the things you take responsibility for, is really hard.
Incredibly hard. The source lists the side effects. Uncertainty is huge. Am I doing the right thing?
Feeling like a failure because your old metrics don't work anymore.
Feeling like a fraud, a nobody, and facing rejection as relationships built on old values might crumble.
And that's why people avoid changing, even when their current values are hurting them.
Precisely. It's easier to stick with a painful certainty, I'm unattractive, my job sucks, than to risk testing that belief and finding out you were wrong, or having to navigate the uncertainty of change.
Those certainties provide comfort now, but at the cost of the future.
That's the idea. We mortgage future happiness for present, albeit painful, certainty. We assume we're right.
So the source argues certainty is actually the enemy.
Certainty is the enemy of growth. Nothing's truly certain. We need to accept the imperfections in our own values and beliefs.
So instead of seeking certainty, seek doubt.
Seek doubt. Doubt about our beliefs, our feelings, our assumptions about the future. Instead of trying to be right, look for how we might be wrong.
We're always just approaching truth, never fully there.
Exactly. Chip away at the ways we're wrong today so we can be a little less wrong tomorrow. That's the path to progress.
Being wrong opens the door to change. We shouldn't trust our first impressions of experiences either. Good can be bad, bad can be good.
Right. Immediate pleasure or pain isn't a reliable guide for long-term value. Our minds are flawed. We create narratives, believe our own bullshit, and then filter evidence to confirm it.
The source is pretty blunt.
Yeah.
Most of our beliefs are wrong. Or maybe all of them are. Just some are less wrong than others.
So that advice to trust yourself or go with your gut, maybe we should trust ourselves less.
Self-skepticism becomes key, rigorously challenging our own assumptions.
It's presented as the only logical path, given how unreliable our minds can be. Think about things like false memory syndrome.
So openness to being wrong is essential. You have to become uncertain, see the flaws in your current values, admit ignorance.
And this ties into Manson's law of avoidance.
Remind me.
The more something threatens your identity, the more you avoid it. If being wrong threatens how you see yourself, you'll dodge it.
Like if you think your friend's partner is bad news, and being wrong about that would make you feel foolish or less wise, you'll avoid considering you might be wrong.
Often, yeah. And that avoidance usually reveals more about your own insecurities or flawed values.
So you have a choice. Option A, insist you're right, create drama, damage the relationship.
The easy path, requiring little thought, zero tolerance, often causing the most misery.
Option B, mistrust your certainty, stay humble, trust your friend's judgment, live with the outcome out of respect.
The harder path. Painful, forces humility, but allows growth and avoids being selfish or unfair.
Most people pick A, the source suggests.
Sadly, yes. B is tough. The author's rule, if it feels like you versus the world, it's almost certainly you versus yourself.
Which brings us back around to failure, not as something to avoid, but as the way forward.
Exactly. The author talks about his post-college experience, realizing money was a lousy metric for him.
He could be rich and miserable, or broke and happy.
So he changed his metric. Failure became not trying his own projects, rather than lack of money. That let him take risks, sleep on couches, because not trying was the bigger failure by his new standard.
This is the failure-success paradox again. Improvement comes from lots of small failures. Big success comes from failing many times.
Like Picasso's napkin, 60 years of failures and practice behind it. Successful people fail way more often than average people. Failure is the path.
So why are we so scared of it? Overprotective parents. Media showing only perfect success.
Both are suggested. We learn to instinctively avoid failure, stick to the safe path.
Again, it connects to values and metrics. Get a girlfriend? Shitty metric. Depends on others.
Right. Anxiety-inducing, outside your control.
Improve my social life. Better metric focuses on your actions within your control.
Exactly. Shitty values, external goals. Better values, internal processes. Express myself honestly. Never finished. Always engaging.
Happiness comes from that ongoing engagement, that growth, not hitting some endpoint.
And pain is part of that process. The source mentions studies of trauma survivors, like Dabrowski's work. Extreme pain can force radical perspective shifts, leading to growth and resilience.
Weathering this shitstorm makes you question failing values.
So denying pain is denying potential. Our biggest growth often comes after our biggest struggles.
But what if you just can't get started? No motivation.
The do something principle. We think it's inspiration, motivation, less action.
But the source flips it.
Flips it.
Yeah.
Action, inspiration, motivation.
Do anything, even something tiny.
Anything. The smallest step towards a potential new value or goal. Use the reaction to that tiny action to fuel the next bit of inspiration, the next action. The author did this, building his business starting with menial tasks, built momentum for bigger ones.
So lower the bar for success to just acting. Any result is progress. Inspiration is a reward, not a prerequisite.
Yes. Then failure feels less important. It just pushes you forward. It's a way to break procrastination and start adopting new values. If everything feels pointless, just do something and see how it feels. Action is always possible. And this willingness to act, struggle, and fail allows us to make real commitments. Which brings us to the importance of saying no.
Because commitment means saying no to other options.
Fundamentally, yes. The author reflects on his years of travel, 55 countries. Sounds amazing.
The digital nomad dream.
But he saw it partly as driven by commitment issues, trying to experience everything equally.
But breadth lacks depth.
Exactly. He was bouncing between experiences while friends were building deeper connections. Marriage, career, community.
His experience in Russia highlighted this, the bluntness.
Initially felt rude, yeah, but he came to appreciate it as honest, unadulterated expression. It made him question Western fake niceness. Does make us insecure, worse at intimacy.
The theory being that under communism, trust was key, requiring honesty. Saying no clearly was valued.
Right. Avoiding rejection, giving, or receiving feels good short-term, but leaves you rudderless.
To really value something, you have to commit. Confine yourself to it.
Depth requires rejecting breadth. The deepest joys, the source argues, come from decades of investment in a relationship, a craft, a cause. You can't get that depth without saying no to other paths.
There are diminishing returns on just more stuff. More countries, more hobbies, more casual relationships.
Yeah. Each new thing adds less significance over time. The author found commitment in his 30s, writing one partner, one place, few close friends, far more rewarding.
Commitment wasn't limiting. It opened up different opportunities.
A wealth of opportunity and experiences that breadth couldn't offer. Digging deep yields treasure.
And commitment means saying no. Prioritizing some values means rejecting others. Saying no defines boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Boundaries are just the line between your problems and someone else's problems. Healthy relationships have clear boundaries, each person responsible for their own stuff.
Toxic relationships have poor boundaries, avoiding responsibility.
Yes, often involving entitlement. Either blaming others, the victim role, or taking responsibility for others, the saver role.
Both using each other for emotional fixes. And addiction.
Kind of. And they might find healthy partners with good boundaries boring because the usual drama isn't there.
Hardest thing for victims.
Right.
Self-accountability. Hardest for savers. Stop fixing others.
Right. Healthy relationships need the ability to say no and hear no. Conflict isn't bad, it's necessary for trust. Lack of conflict can mean manipulation.
Trust is everything. Without it, love feels conditional. Cheating breaks trust because it shows something else was valued more.
A healthy relationship isn't about managing your partner's feelings. It's about supporting their growth, letting them solve their own problems.
Giving a fuck about the partner regardless of what they give a fuck about. Unconditional support.
That's the idea. And trust is built through conflict, by showing up for each other, not by trying to make everything feel good all the time. That makes things fall apart.
Wow. Okay, that brings us to the final layer. The ultimate fuck not to give. The fear of death.
Yeah, this gets profound. The author shares the story of his friend Josh dying young at 19.
A huge turning point for him. A clear before and after.
Before, inhibited, insecure, obsessed with others' opinions. After, responsible, curious, hardworking. Still insecure, sure, but he now gave a fuck about something more important than those insecurities. Confronting mortality changed everything.
And this connects to Ernest Becker's ideas, immortality projects.
Right. Becker argued we unconsciously strive to create a symbolic self through work, family, beliefs, status, something that feels like it will outlast our physical death.
Driven by this underlying death terror.
Yes, and when those projects fail or feel threatened, that deep anxiety about death surfaces.
But Becker's final realization was, the projects are the problem.
Kind of. That we should question this conceptual self we're trying to make immortal and instead become comfortable with the reality of death itself.
Embracing impermanence is the ultimate not giving a fuck, leads to less entitlement.
That's the argument. If you're comfortable with death, the root fear, you're free to choose values more authentically, not driven by this illogical quest for symbolic immortality or rigid certainty.
Death is the one certainty, so it should be the compass, orienting everything else.
It's presented as the correct answer for figuring out what truly matters. The author's cliff edge experience captures this.
The intense fear, but pushing through it, asking those huge questions. Is this it?
Yeah? Feeling the fear but not being controlled by it. Choosing focus over panic. It's a metaphor for living with the awareness of death.
And avoiding that awareness lets trivial things hijack our lives.
The superficial seems important. The important seems superficial.
Josh's death taught him there is nothing to be afraid of, ever. Reminding himself of mortality dissolves lesser fears, makes trivial stuff trivial.
And motivates action on what matters, leads to feeling intensely alive.
Whereas entitlement isolates us, projects our biases.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual poison, often rooted in avoiding that death terror.
That's the connection made. Demanding the world cater to us. Enforcing certainties, it stems from avoiding the fundamental uncertainty of existence.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. This deep dive has really challenged that constant chase for positivity.
And shown pain and problems not just as obstacles, but necessary parts of growth. Happiness comes from solving problems.
We've explored how who you are is maybe defined more by what you're willing to struggle for.
Yeah, confronting entitlement, the pressure to be exceptional, and seeing how vital it is to choose our values and metrics consciously.
Taking responsibility for our own responses, regardless of blame, and the power of commitment, which requires saying no.
And finally, using the awareness of death not as something morbid, but as a compass, a tool to focus on what truly matters.
So not giving a fuck isn't apathy at all. It's a difficult, lifelong practice of careful prioritization.
Choosing your struggles, reserving your limited energy for what aligns with your chosen values, deciding what pain is worth sustaining.
Because that choice shapes your life far more than just chasing pleasure. So, the final thought for you, the listener. Given the struggles, the uncertainty, the eventual end, where are your finite fucks best spent? What values are you truly willing to struggle for?